What's up, guys? It's Chris from Pursuit of Possibility. Welcome to my channel. It's committed to sharing positive perspective and practical strategies to live life fully. And speaking of living life fully, we've got a guest today, Rich Robinson, who's lived fully and then some. Oh, there he is. Yep. Rich, let me give you a little bit of a highlight reel on Rich. He's started and grown many startups, not just as an executive, but as a founder and CEO and on advisory boards. He's a sought after keynote speaker. He writes children's books. He's got a book coming out soon. He teaches at the top 2 universities in China. The list goes on and on. Rich, it's really a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for being here, man.
Chris, ladies and gentlemen, kaboom! Give it up for Chris. Everybody at home.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So you are quite a jet setter. We're talking earlier. You're showing me your place. I'd love for you to show the audience. You're in Bali, right?
I am in the island of the gods. Here's our backyard. It's a lovely tropical place. This is the back here, and the nature. The culture,
amazing.
It's just and the location as well too. It's the same time zone as China. It's just like this sort of like elbow right here, the southeastern part of
great visual
of Asia. So you can zip over to Singapore in less than a couple hours. I can get back to China in about less than say 4 hours to southern China. No jet lag, and I spent 25 years, my 25th year in Asia, and 24 of that in China. And now I'm splitting time between Beijing and Bali because during COVID, the new normal is you can live and work anywhere. So if one can live and work anywhere, then I choose the dusty northeast suburbs of Beijing. What? No. Well, I choose the island of the gods, and that's where I am now.
Rich, I love your energy. I'm a high energy guy, but I feel like you're topping me. It's amazing. It's contagious.
Yeah, come on, let's go.
Let's go. The thing is, Pursuit of Possibility is committed to sharing contagious positivity. And like we talked about, positive perspective and practical strategies to live life fully. So I know you're going to have a lot of wisdom that hopefully we can extract as much of it as possible today. I will say you're so right, though. You kind of reminded me of the human freedom that lies between a stimulus and response, our ability to choose how we respond to circumstances. We just had a full, blown pandemic, right? But you're an example of someone who rolled with the punches. You chose your response and you're living fully. And that's really cool to see. And for me, I'm going to be living in Austin, Texas for the next 4 months from May to September, then coming back to LA.
Awesome.
So I really do think a lot of good has come out of the pandemic, the flexibility, the mobility, the innovation in the technology space. This wasn't how I planned to start the interview, but what are your thoughts on some of the beautiful things that have come from the adversity that we faced this past year?
I have so many friends who described being boiled like a frog. People that are on the wrong side of 40 or 50 like me, got 3 kids, just
you look
started.
Younger.
Yeah, I'll be 54 this summer. Thanks very much.
Really?
You start to do things for the family and for your career, and you start to, lose bits of yourself and start to, compromise, and just, the treadmill gets 1 degree higher and, 5 kilometers an hour faster, and backpack gets another kilo heavy. That's how long I've been in Asia. I'm using metric system. And then you're like, well, wait a second, what? Like, what's going on? And I think there was a big reset, among many of my peers in Asia, in the US, who are like, you know what, I'm going to take a 5, 10, 15% haircut in my salary, but I'm going to move to, a place where I have a good lifestyle, or I'm closer to my family, or I'm not, making, $500,000 a year combined, and we're saving $6,000 a year because we're living like grad students, even though we make, order of magnitude more than our parents, but we choose to live in San Francisco or New York or wherever, right, or LA, right, and it's brutal. And then also, I haven't had jet lag in 15 months now, and that's a beautiful thing. I had an incredible mini shampoo collection from around planet Earth, and very hard earned. And I've had dinner with my, I was separated from my boys, but now my 3 kids my whole family's here in Bali. And we have dinner together, every night. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. There's one guy that I love, Kevin Kelly.
I love that.
Founder of Wired Magazine. And he spends a lot of time with the Amish, in, the Pennsylvania Dutch, so to speak. And, one of the beautiful things is, they've abandoned a lot of technology so they can, be back to nature. But, one of the things about the Amish is they have breakfast, lunch, and dinner with their family, every day until they leave the house. And that's just, was just kind of impossible before, with travel and with kids' schedules. And, that's something I'm really grateful for.
You know what, Rich, that's a great point about families. God bless you. God bless America. Anyways, no, I'm just kidding.
America!
That's one of my cheesy jokes I've done since I was like in middle school, and I still recycle it, man. I'm glad
you're not even a dad yet, and you're rocking
man. That's the one thing is people say I'm ready to be a dad because I'm full of dad jokes, but I don't know if it really works that way. Anyways, but I will say this, man. Like even I'm in sales, and like one CEO I was meeting with said the same thing. Like he's just so glad to be with his family. For some people, it's kind of difficult being with a family. People rub each other the wrong way. Right. But one thing I want to say is that the power of family dinners at the dinner table, one thing my mom did right, I think I'm grateful for, is that she would have us all come together as a family at dinner table. And she would force us, it's so cheesy, but to ask like an open-ended question. You couldn't say like, how was your day? And you're like, good. You say like, what was the best part of your day? And this is kind of crazy and nerdy too, but she would like read vocab words to us. But overall, I'm going on a tangent, just that act of like being together and sharing food and being mindful. Yeah. Don't you think that's powerful?
Absolutely. And I do that with my kids. My wife is really terrific in that regard. Like, what did you learn today? What's exactly a learning moment? And that's how character and, some resiliency is built by these, tiny little building blocks. And I think having the the family together really is super important. And my son turns 17 next week, and he's
what day?
He's 24th. Is that next? Yeah, and he's
okay.
He's out the door in 14-15 months, and it's bittersweet, and almost can't believe it. But I think I'm really appreciating that. And I'm also, sort of getting prison fit in a way by being, in the same sort of like, little loop, because we don't really go very far. We work from home, and, there's a gym around the corner. I think COVID's either made people a really much worse version of themselves or a much better version of themselves. So.
Well, okay. I didn't mean to raise like I'm a worse version, but I do have a little bit of a dad bod going right now. The gut's gotten a little bigger. I used to be in like literally, Rich, I don't know if I told you, I was like 7% body fat in college and like even carrying into adulthood. But I don't know, I'm happy, but I'm glad to hear that you've like kind of gotten in shape. I know a lot of people are in response to the pandemic. Okay. This is the way I was planning to start the interview, is to have you tell your life story and some of the key inflection points or plot twists. Right. And I bet it's, I'll be on the edge of my seat. I need some popcorn for this, but I just feel like that would be a good starting point. And then I do have some specific questions about life and habits and business, and we can roll with it and your book. So.
Sounds great. Yeah. So I grew up in the greater Boston, and my grandparents are from Ireland. So I have dual citizenship from Ireland, and, lovely upbringing. My dad was a baker. My mom was a secretary at the Boston Edison Electric Company. Wow. Shut that light off. I work for the electric company. I don't own it. And I always worked with my dad. He had a Humpty Dumpty diner donut shop. So I grew up, working with him as a, baker and a cook, working in the kitchen. And I really learned, good work ethic and really shitty dad jokes from him. So and I went to high school, this all-boy Jesuit prep school called Boston College High School. It was in like Dorchester, right next to Southie. Yeah. I wanted to get Goodwill Hunting for some of my Chinese friends when I to let them know what it's like growing up an Irish Catholic kid, around Boston area, and I couldn't find it at the DVD shop. And the guy says, "What's it about again?" And I said, "It's about an Irish American genius from South Boston." He goes, "Oh, sure, we have that. We just keep it under the fantasy science fiction section."
Oh my gosh!
Thank you. Good night.
That's crazy.
So I went to high school there by subway, and I remember there's this one inflection point where it was sleeting, and Boston's actually the windiest city in America. It's not
Really?
Chicago. Chicago's the windy city because of the gift of the gab. That's why it was dubbed that. But it was sleeting like sideways or like upside down. And one guy said, I'm going to go to school in Florida. I'll be a Gator. And one guy's like, I'm going to go to Hawaii. And I said, I'll split the difference and I'll go to LA. And then I got back to class and like the cuff of my pants was frozen like a bell. You could like crack it. And I thought, wow, maybe I will go to school in Southern California. I always liked the warm weather. So I ended up going to USC and University of Southern California in South Central Los Angeles. Back in '84, the acceptance rate was 1 out of 3, and they wanted a well-rounded student body. So I got pretty much a full ride out there. And I took my wicked hash Boston accent out to California. And to this day, all my fraternity brothers,
far away,
wicked far away. And after I drank Cuddy Sock in the park with an Advac and Maki Mak, I went out there. And my fraternity buddies to this day still call me Bosto, short for Bostonian.
Really?
And while I was there, I noticed they had an exchange program with Cambridge University, and lots of ties back to the UK and Ireland because my mom was first generation. So I studied at Cambridge University, '88. It was sort of like Harry Potter for grown-ups before Harry Potter, right? The dining halls and the quad, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And then I did the Ugly American whistle stop tour around Europe, 4 weeks, Eurail Pass, lots of beer, bad attitude, America, right? And then I met this Aussie guy. It was a big inflection point, kind of like that sleeting inflection point, sending me off to California. I remember being so full of myself. Like I've been traveling for 4 weeks after I did that exchange at Cambridge, and like I'm like Indiana fucking Jones, right? And I'd meet somebody. How long have you been on the road? 2 weeks. What about you? 4 weeks. Yeah, double the time you've been on the road. I must have, there's maybe only 17,000 people that slept in this one bunk bed in this youth hostel. I'm kind of a pioneer. And then I meet this Aussie guy, and he's eating pasta out of the pot that somebody like left it behind, leftovers from like this youth hostel, Bombers Youth Hostel in Switzerland, Interlaken. And he was like, I don't know, mate, 4.5 years. And I was like, what? Like his rounding error was orders of magnitude more, than like my, my time on the road. And I didn't even know that was a thing. This is '88, way pre-internet. And he said he was broke as. And I was like, broke as what? And he's like, I guess fuck. I don't know, but I'm broke as, mate. I don't have any money, so I just work and travel. And also he had a fear of flying, so he had done it all by boat or land. So he took a boat to New Zealand, sheared sheep. He was like a rural guy. Made a bunch of money, boat to Indonesia, worked in Thailand, drove a truck through Africa, worked in the Middle East, and now he was in Europe, and he was still, maybe 2/3 of the way through. And he told me something in addition to just working his way around the world, which was there's 4 swaths of land, like frame the world as a silhouette. There's North, South America, and then there's Europe, Asia, and then thirdly, Africa, and last, Australia. And he said, if you do those 4 overland trips, then you're covering the world by land, and it's, just 4 trips, and you can see and hear and, experience, but more importantly, you can smell the world, mate. You can smell it. And I was like, I want to smell the world. I want to do that too. Can I smell the world, please? And there's definitely lots of sights. Like CNN's got the sights and sounds of, the Ivory Coast, but there's also the smells that
I would have never thought of the
very
smell
fun.
because I'm a visual guy, and it's like
Yeah.
that's so funny. Yeah.
The smells really really frame places in a very, very stark and memorable way. But yeah, so I had that in mind. So I went back to Boston, and I made a deal with my parents, and then I spent 3.5 years working my way around the world. And I was a bartender in the Virgin Islands, soft landing because it has U.S. currency and you can work there. And then I went to that youth hostel where I met that guy in Switzerland, and I tried to get a job there. But I ended up getting a job up in the mountains. This is 1990. So 89, I graduate from college, and 89 is this pivotal year. The wall falls in Berlin.
Oh yeah.
The apartheid ends in South Africa, but then China takes 3 steps backwards with Tiananmen. But everywhere else in the world, it felt like communism's ending, and the future is in front of us. So China was definitely not on my radar. China was a Peace Corps destination, and the 80s was really dominated by Japan was going to take over the world if Russia didn't destroy it first. So China wasn't even, something that I thought about. But I wanted to be in Europe, and I have dual citizenship with Ireland. So I ended up being working in that hotel in Switzerland. Then I taught English in Prague after the revolution. And then I lived in a fishing village in Norway. And then I lived in this naked city in the south of France. I think
you told me a story when we first spoke about that, right? Yeah. Naked city. What does that even mean? They don't wear clothes? Like they're just free over there? Or?
So mandatory nudity on the beach, clothing optional everywhere else in the city. So people like shopping and mini golfing and driving, but
oh my gosh.
I kind of stumbled upon the place. Yeah, it's like 15,000 people. And it's called Agde, AGDE, the Cape of Agde, Cap d'Agde. And then I'd heard about the grape harvesting season, the vendage. And I had this somehow naively romantic notion. Yeah, I'll go pick grapes and, be playing the mandolin under a harvest moon with some beautiful French woman or something, right? It's like, it couldn't be, I can't play the mandolin, but anyway, and it's pretty cold that time of year too. And by the way, there's no beautiful French women picking grapes. It's all itinerant fruit pickers and refugees and drug addicts and gypsies. And it was, I did that for a few weeks, and it was really, really miserable. I remember I went up near Bordeaux, a little tiny town called Sisak, and I met these Romanian refugees. They were all college educated guys, but there was a mandatory conscription. They didn't want to join the army. So they had lived in a squatter's, building in Paris and shoplifted to be able to stay alive. And one guy spoke German, and my German was conversational back then. And he's like, they were good guys. I liked them immediately, but I could only talk to the guy in German. And he was like, all my friends say, you're a rich American. You're going to quit. You're never going to make this, make it.
You're a rich, literally.
Yeah, totally. And also they were like, Reich Amerikaner, you're not going to deal with this bullshit. And I didn't meet those guys, I would have quit probably day 2. It was miserable. Right. You're squatting down all day, and you have these clippers, and you have to clip the bunches of grapes. You're not picking the grapes individually. You're clipping a bunch. But you got to move so quickly because everybody else is skilled and smaller and just better at it. And they get to the end and they rest until the last guy comes. And then you go to the next row. And I was always the last guy. So I never got to rest. And it was just not built for it. And I was cutting my fingers, little cuts. And then the grape juice would get in there and they're all infected. And I was I got sick. And then we're eating outside because there's no room. They had this old barn with bunk beds, and it was raining, and there were all these dogs that were mangy, and I used the word mangy, mangy mutt, from Scooby-Doo. I would have made it too if it wasn't for you meddling kids in that mangy mutt, but I never knew what mange really was, patches of fur missing, and
wow,
you could see their ribs, these dogs, and I always loved dogs, so I would give them scraps, but they were overeating, and then they would just just would be puking next to me, and I'm shivering, and my bowl of stew is getting fuller from the rain, and I was thinking probably not a lot of USC Trojans doing this right now, but I stuck with it because of those guys. And then I did another ski season in Switzerland. And then I worked at the BMW factory in Germany. I ended up going to Germany with the intention of becoming a Versuchskaninchen, which means guinea pig. So all these pharmaceutical companies, Bayer is Bayer, in Munich, and they do all this clinical testing, and then they do human trials towards the end. And there's a whole bunch of backpackers that I got to know, Kiwis, Aussies, South Africans, Brits, who were like traveling for years and years and years. And this was kind of a hack, because 6 months, this is how dated I am. 6 months, you get 6,000 D-Mark, Deutschmark. There's no Deutschmark anymore. It's all euros. And you'd watch like video cassettes, videotapes, and like read books, and you get food, and you just hang out with other dudes. And you got to hope that maybe you're the placebo. And then you get 6,000, which was probably like, I don't know, $3,000-4,000 bucks at the end of it.
Money.
And then you travel Asia for a year, right? This is, 30 years ago.
Okay, yeah.
So I go to Munich with that intention, and I had this American friend. She had a German boyfriend, and they let me camp in their parents' backyard for a couple of nights. And they were like, "Oh, no way, you're not going to do that. You're going to get some horrible disease, or you're going to come work for my husband." And I was like, "What?" And so I got a job as a scaffolder in his scaffolding business, Gerüstbauer. And then I hurt my back, and then I got a job at the BMW factory working on the assembly line. 3 Series engines, because I could speak German, and it was fascinating. This sprawling BMW factory in the Olympic near the Olympic Village, Petuel Ring in Munich. And then from there, I went overland. I went to Switzerland, got this plate taken out of my leg. I had an injury, a ski injury, and then I hitchhiked Switzerland to Prague. Prague, took the train to Kiev, and then Kiev to Moscow, and then Moscow to Mongolia, Ulaanbaatar, and then Ulaanbaatar, Beijing, and then Beijing down to Shanghai, and then to Hong Kong. So I went overland from Switzerland to Hong Kong, sort of mirroring that Aussie guy's, suggestion. I thought that would be the most kind of romantic and, fascinating trip. And indeed it was, right? My intention was to do that overland trip, and, the geography changed, and people's faces changed, and the cuisine, and it's just like this slow burn. It was 11 days over a 30-day period. And I had super low expectations for China. As I said, Peace Corps destination. It was 4 years after Tiananmen, so there's still this kind of like hangover there, at least in the press. Yeah. But I got there. The train, it's fascinating because in Mongolia, the rails are thinner, so they actually jack up the whole train, and then they take the wheels off and they put different wheels on. So you're on a narrow gauge rail, and they do the same thing when you get to China, and then they change the engine at the front, and then they change the dining car in the back. And we'd been eating Russian and Mongolian food, which is not necessarily world renowned, especially train food. And then that Chinese train car was just full of all these Chinese that were coming from Russia, Mongolia, and it was just packed. And it was my first taste of like real Chinese food. And even though it was train food, it was fantastic. And then, you could just feel the electricity. There was just something, talk about smelling things. Like you could feel that, like, wow, the dragon just Game of Thrones, just grabbed me by the sternum. And then I married the dragon, and we had 2 kids, and now we're amicably divorced. But I fell in love with China. The dragon really swooped down right then. Like I mean it, like love at first sight. With China, I just knew it was the biggest story of our life, and indeed it is. Right, the urban migration from the rural areas, the increase in GDP per capita. China was 70% in poverty, and then now it's 1%. Like that's like fucking miraculous.
What a transformation!
Amazing, right? And there's a lot of ideological differences, and there's a lot of things about the government that, of course, democracy is the worst form of government, except for all other forms of government. And democracy is just messy, right? And China has a different, approach, autocracy and, central government, still a lot of freewheeling capitalism, but there's a lot of things that I don't, agree about China, but I love. I still have a love affair with the country, right? The people, the culture, the history, the dynamism, the scale, the promise, and that's my first book. I'm writing my first big boy book, not a children's book. It's called At the Speed of China, about how things are changing. So I fell in love with China, and I didn't have a choice. So then I traveled around the rest of Asia, Southeast Asia. I came to Bali. That was late 93, early 94. Back when I got to China then 28 years ago, you couldn't even use their currency. You had to use a special FEC, foreign exchange currency. It was the last probably week or two of that. And it was much closer to Mao than to now, for sure. Right. That was 28 years ago, and Mao had been dead then for almost 20 years. But it was, it was almost like it was 56 years ago, or 75 years ago. Like the change has been so extreme and so rapid. And then I went to graduate school in the Netherlands. I got my MBA at the Rotterdam School of Management at Erasmus. Back in the 90s, you want an international MBA. It was Europe. The US programs were very US centric. There was nothing in Asia, nothing anywhere else. Kind of typical suspects of INSEAD or, the ones in, Norway or Bocconi or Spain, but I chose Erasmus. I felt it was the most international program, top 5 program in Europe. Yep. And that was August of 94. And I had a second epiphany. I surfed on the internet with a friend, and we used Mosaic, the predecessor of Netscape, and surfed on the consumer web for the first time. And, by that time I was 27 years old, and I'd used the internet, but it was all text-based.
Hey, that's my age.
Yeah. And I think about it. You see this kind of like shitty blinky GIF, site, from, on, graphical interface for the first time. And you're like, wow, like you didn't need to be any visionary. You're like, this is a game changer. What a game changer. So I just thought, okay, I was kind of jack of all trades, master of none. A lot of people in my MBA program are like, oh, I'm on the client side, but I want to be on the agency side. And, now I'm in the oil industry, but I want to become a consultant, or, whatever. I'm in finance, but I want to move towards operations. And like, what about you? And I was like, I want to be an internet guy in China. And it was like 1984. And they were like, yeah, okay, good luck with that. Right. And that was before there was no ad. There were no ads on the internet. There was no way to pay for anything. You want to buy something, you have to like send a check to, Jeff Bezos. Even like Yahoo was like hosted on like the Stanford, personal computer account of Jerry Yang and David Philo. So it was like still super early days. And then I spent the summer between Hong Kong and Amsterdam doing a project for my summer internship. And I stayed with a buddy of mine. And Woody Allen, for all of his faults, he said something once, which was 80% of success is just showing up. So
that's so true.
I had been, my buddy in Hong Kong, and I was like, I want to be an internet guy in China. I can't do a resume-based job search. So I'm just going to come and, darken your doorways and towels in a few months. So I graduated in 96, up to my neck in student loans, no job, no money, no real savings. So I waited tables for a little bit, and then I got a one-way ticket to Africa. And I thought, okay, let's do this other overland trip, this other swath of land. And I'd been in Vietnam during that first trip to Asia, and I met a guy who got a hold of this 1942 Harley Davidson with a sidecar. And Vietnam, similar to Cuba, in that they kept cars running or motorcycles running for decades because there was an embargo and you couldn't ship new vehicles in. This thing still ran fairly well. We were driving that thing around in the Mekong Delta, and then we met this guy randomly riding a bicycle from China, an Austrian guy, and he was like sleeping in a police station or, Catholic church, and like he really opened my eyes. It's like, wow, that's a real way to do overland travel and slow it down. So I graduate, I get that one-way ticket to Israel, spent a week in Israel, spent a week in Egypt, and then I landed in Nairobi, and I rode a bicycle from Nairobi to Cape Town, 5,000 kilometers. It's like Boston to LA.
Wow.
And because of the Mercator projection, Africa looks smaller, but it's really a gigantic, expansive continent. And it took me 4 months, 4 bicycles, some stolen, some broken, 4 courses of antibiotics. And I did 4,000 kilometers by bike and the rest by boat or truck if something broke down or if I was sick or whatever. And
Wow.
it kicked my ass. It was stimulating, it was boring, it was reckless. It was like being an entrepreneur.
Talk
Go ahead.
about grit, that intersection of passion and perseverance, like to achieve something like that, is like, to think you got sick, you had bikes break down, like you had to be resourceful. I mean, that's unbelievable. You're right. It's like business. It sounds like.
Yeah. I mean, I think, people say, how do I become an entrepreneur? And the way to become an entrepreneur is actually to be an entrepreneur. But I think there's probably a couple of things you can do. Maybe 3 things, which is, one, you could join a startup like super early and just be a student of that. And, and like that, that is a feasible way to kind of build up some, skill sets and really observe what's going on. Another is to do kind of like a side hustle while you're, and get some scabs and calluses and scar tissue like armor. But I think another is to do travel. If you can travel, and I don't mean travel like Instagram-y kind of like, everything is awesome. I mean, more like, this is pretty miserable. I don't know where I'm going to sleep tonight. And, but I choose to position this as an adventure instead of a nightmare, because that's what, you said in the very beginning of the show that, there's stimulus and then there's space and then response. And indeed, the only 2 things under your control is your reaction and your action. That's it. Like nothing else is in your control. Other things are in your influence or, but those are the only 2 things you can control. So, and I think specifically really focusing on your reaction, that's something that's super, super powerful, because then that really helps you to have that equanimity to have a much stronger action when you're intentionally acting. You can't control what happens to you, but you can control how you respond to it. So I think travel is great for that, because so many years, not just that trip to Africa, but like having to sleep in a train station in Prague and like every, 3 minutes, prosim pozor, like some announcement, and you're just like woken up, or, taking a hard seat for 48 hours to, another place in China, or, hitchhiking and being stuck on the road for a day, and then having to go back in your tent, kind of, damp. You wake up the next morning, all those things, and you're like, oh, everything is all still here, and I'm still alive, and everything's okay. And by the way, the vast majority of human history, that was just a normal night. Like,
wow, good point.
So I'm a little hungry, and I don't know where my next meal's coming from, and I'm kind of thirsty, and I'm kind of uncomfortable, and but I'm still here. Right.
It almost reminds me of stoicism, voluntarily exposing yourself to discomfort. And you know what, Rich, when I had the privilege of talking to you for the first time and, asking you, I prepared some questions. And one thing I might have asked, which I wanted to ask today, is kind of like, what's been a common denominator of success in your life? Because you have succeeded across, and I know success is relative. We define what success looks like, but you've succeeded across many domains. What's a common denominator? And I just remember you had said to me, that like leaning into discomfort, right? It's so simple, but almost like just like living in discomfort, right? And it seems like that's something that you've really, applied in your travels, and I'm sure in business too. But I wanted to tie it to that question, to really ask you, like, what do you think has been a common thread or denominator of success for you across different domains?
That's great. I'm going to, first of all, succeed in charging my laptop. Give me 1 second. So hold on.
Okay. I'll try and find some elevator music. Make sure to subscribe, guys. It's me dancing. I was doing a little head dance while you're gone. I tried, Rich. I was doing a little head dance while you were gone, and tried to find some elevator music. It didn't work out. Or Jeopardy. Excellent. Jeopardy. Yeah.
All right, we're back.
Oh, nice. By the way, hey, Rich, didn't you do quick? I mean, you're a funny guy, you know. That was pretty cool. It's like, have you done stand-up comedy, by the way, or you like MC'd with Jim Gaffigan? Like, how do you come up with these things? Like, yeah, little sidebar, and then we'll get back to that other question.
Yeah, I mean, I love stand-up comedy. It's certainly a big passion of mine. I'm trying to get my my charger to sit there. Yeah, I started doing stand-up comedy in the 80s, and then I started a show, kind of like the Little Rascals, that old TV show. It's like, I got a wagon wheel, I got a donkey, I got a carrot, we got a show. And I just started a show in Hong Kong because I could, called Chopsticks. And yeah, well, I brought out Jim Gaffigan twice, right? And
wow,
Louis C.K. in a
no way.
Yeah, he came out to Beijing for season 3 of his Louis TV show, and turns out a buddy of mine in Beijing went to high school with him, so he did a show at a 350-year-old Peking Opera Theater. Also Russell Peters and Second City from Chicago, Mark Maron. You know, it's great. And my job is I organized the show, and it was a side hustle, and I learned so much from doing those events. You know, the main takeaway from business is that the most expensive thing at an event is an empty seat. So you have to deal with that. But then I would get up and open for them and tell some jokes, and in doing so, I would make them look just that much better, actually. So that was my job.
Was that one of your jokes?
I did it very well, and I remember one really good. So now I've become a professional public speaker because I'm titanium. Like, if you can do stand up and deal with fickle audiences, and, you know, just marinate in your own aloneness, in your empty soul, naked and bare on stage, then, you know, what can any business conference situation, you know, what kind of blow can that deal you that you can't manage? So I remember it was probably my second show in Hong Kong, and I had written this set list, and I put a big star on either side of laughter pause. Like, just wait, because I told a joke the first show, and I stepped on the joke. I didn't let people give them the space to do it. So I gave a laughter pause, except it was only me pausing, and there was no laughter. And about 350 people in the audience, and I paused a little too long, and then one of them, turns out a friend of mine, all the way in the back, just let out this tiny little groan because he was too uncomfortable to sit in the silence and pain. He just went, and then everybody laughed. And then, you know, and that's okay, right? I should have rode that wave, but instead of riding that wave, up next, ladies and gentlemen, up next, put your hands together. Rich Seisler, everybody, right? And I swallowed my words and just sucking the energy out of the room. And then later, Rich Seisler, who's since passed away, God rest his soul, he said, "Hey, can I give you a tip?" And I was like, "Yes, please do." And he's like, "It doesn't matter if you don't get a laugh. It's okay. People aren't expecting, like, gotta make me laugh every time. God damn it, right?" I mean,
wow.
But people really care how you make them feel. Like, that's the most important thing.
Gosh.
So
Maya Angelou, right?
Sit up there. Yes, exactly. You know, I think, you know, that's true in a one-on-one interaction. That's true in a small group, you know, when you're writing something, but also when you're on stage, like, you really have to just so many people are nervous on stage because they feel that they're being intently judged by everybody in the audience. Like there's a whole bunch of like jackals and hyenas out there just with their eyes glowing, like ready to pounce. The fact is that nobody GAF. The biggest problem is apathy. Nobody even cares. It's got that blue glow, and they're just like, oh yeah, what? Yeah, sure, whatever. Like nobody's paying attention. Never mind. Everybody's saying their own name in their own head.
Exactly.
Over, right. So if you're, I remember one time TechCrunch came to China, and they had 1,100 people in the audience. This was about a decade ago, and I'm still learning. Always learning. I was not quite as comfortable as I am now, but I remember I got a coffee and I left my whole rundown on a piece of paper on the table, and instead of like, oh, and we're back, and then I was like every pocket like 3 times, and instead of saying, oh hey, my rundown is outside there, give me a second, then I know everybody would just like talk, and then it would just be like, I just it was a wireless mic, and I just grabbed it and I just walked down the audience, and I was like, we have this amazing rundown today, we're going to talk about this and this, and I was like, hey, there's what's his name, and there's hey, there's the founder of Instagram, there's the founder of YouTube,
wow.
And there's hey, and then I just like popped on the door, hey, give me that, and then I walked back, and then I got up to the stage and I said something, and I was like, and by the way, I left this, after I said everything, I left this out on the coffee table outside, and then everybody laughed. Everybody's with me because I didn't crumble under that.
Wow.
I just was like, who cares anyway, right? And I'm just like, I learned the lesson of like, I just got to make everybody feel good, and then everything's just going to be fine, right?
Well, Rich, that's unbelievable. Go ahead. I wanted to acknowledge you, though. I wanted to acknowledge you because coming into this, I felt a little nerves, I'm just starting out with
talking to me. Come on.
Yeah. No, but just a little bit, especially when I noticed when I kicked these off, but your energy, man, you elevated me, and you really elevate people. And I want to acknowledge you for that. And it's cool to see in action, like where you are and like how you bring that to the table, so thank you for that. I think we all want to be that type of person, man. And it's just cool to hear kind of your lumps and your story and like what comedy taught you too about business. Like, I think that is such an art to kind of handle the ambiguity and uncertainty and the potential rejection and just still show up powerfully,
Sure. I mean, stand-up comedy I've given presentations about the parallels between stand-up and startup. I mean, Kevin Hart drops a special an hour, like he probably has 20 hours of, 19 hours of kind of like garbage behind that, right? Probably 5% he harvests and hones into that 1 hour special. And a lot of people don't understand or know that, right? And I think a lot of things with startups, it's kind of like that 80-20 or 95-5 rule, right? Where 5% of startups actually, something happens with them, some sort of liquidity event, 1 out of 20. And then, 1 out of those 20, you're probably 400, something, decently happens. And then 1 out of those 20, like 8,000, something really good happens, like a Coinbase or, Instagram or whatever. So it's, the most likely outcome is failure, and it's going to be pretty kind of up and down and miserable along the way. But other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how did you enjoy the play? So it's like, hey, you're going on a journey, and you're probably going to fail. You're going to die. And by the way, along the way, it's really going to suck, and you're going to doubt yourself, and you're going to probably sacrifice your health and your relationships, and you're probably going to come out of this much worse financially. So I'm going to slap the ass of the horse and send you off. Have fun. See you later. Right? What? Like who's the freak like choosing to do that? Like you have to, if you're doing that as an entrepreneur, like you're really suspending all disbelief because you kind of have to, right? So yeah, you're probably going to fail. You're most likely going to fail, and it's going to suck along the way. So therefore, you better be able to cool, as they say in Chinese, like eat bitter and like gladly eat bitter. And then you also have to have this attitude of like, all right, you know what? This probably isn't going to work out, but I'm going to do my best and assume it's going to work out. And then I'm going to learn along the way. And it's going to be like a vocation. And then my next startup, I'm going to take all those learnings and not make the same mistakes again. Right. So you have to like look at it as like, it's not life or death. It's just, there's no failure. It's just feedback. And yeah, I've already decided this is going to suck because it's supposed to suck. Like, of course it's supposed to suck, right? It's like if you're driving down the freeway and you're doing, in LA and you're doing like, 70 miles an hour and you're like, oh, this is great. I got the top down. And then there's some sort of construction and then you're stuck there for 2 hours in there. And then you're, just railing against, the fates and the gods because, this is miserable. But, like you can know that like it's supposed to be like that. There's going to be traffic and other jams along the way. And you have to like be completely ready for that. There's that great quote with Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king of Stoicism, where he's like, today I am going to meet, insolent and arrogant and ungrateful and, people that are unethical. And I know that's part of my role. But therefore, I'm not going to be like, oh, there's another arrogant asshole. Oh, Jesus, there's another, unethical person, right? It's just like, you know that's going to come. So you might as well just prepare your reaction and your action against it. And that's how I think you become successful. You're just like, yep, just another problem to be solved. And, let's chew through it and learn from it and move on. And that's why I think travel is good.
Now, Rich, would that be your answer to that common thread question? Like, what is that common thread or principle that you've seen across success in multiple domains that you would like distill? Would it be kind of that what you just broke down there, or is there anything else you'd add to the mix?
I mean, there actually are a few things that are like there is one common thread that I think that a lot of that informs some success. And one is a network. Having a strong network can inform entrepreneurial success. Like that's one other hack. And that's another thing, just like your lessons, like you can accumulate that and harvest and refresh and expand that your entire life. And I think that's something that, I took, my strengths, which is I'm an extroverted extrovert and I'm very curious and I love shooting the shit with people. And I have a wide and deep network. You ask somebody about me, they're like, yeah, Rich is a, well-connected entrepreneur in China and Asia. And I have 20,000 LinkedIn connections, and it's not a, humble brag. It's just, I've added everybody I've ever interacted with onto LinkedIn, and it's a super, super powerful tool. And, and I have this philosophy of abundance. Somebody needs help, I'll help them. But you can also, tap into that when you need funding, partnerships, staff. It's super, super powerful. So that's another sort of like, hack or thread. And there's many, many threads, I think, along the way. And I think continuously learning, I think that's also, super important. Like a startup is not a company. A startup is a vehicle to test assumptions until you have a viable, repeatable, scalable, profitable model. That's Professor Steve Blank from Stanford. So it's a giant experiment. So startups is a learning vehicle, and an entrepreneur is supposed to be a learning machine. And you can only, output what you input. So you have to continuously input. And I think books are really underrated. And I read a book a week. And the way I do it is I have one on my phone, I have one audiobook, and then I have one on my Kindle. And, roughly a book is, let's say it's 250 pages, page a minute, so that's 4 hours a week. And so that means, 240 minutes. You got to do, 40 minutes of reading a day. And
that's not bad.
If you snack all three, so rotate all three books, 3 different books. And it's easy. It's easy to ingest a book a week. If you do the audiobook and, higher speed even, or if you, learn some speed reading, techniques. you could even up that. But I think, 50 books a year is a nice rhythm. And like, I think if you're younger, then you can do, you have, a couple of thousand books that you can put under your belt, right? I still have, another 1,000 I can read. I hope I never retire and I'm going into my 70s or 80s. So.
Well, I can totally see that with your energy. And there's a couple questions I wanted to ask you. One, it does have to do with energy. I do think like one powerful habit that at least Brendan Burchard talks about. Do you know Brendan Burchard? He's like a high performance coach.
Familiar, no.
Okay, he's got a book called High Performance Habits, and he talks about like bring the joy as kind of one of his habits, and clearly it seems like you do that, and kind of generating mental, emotional, and physical energy necessary to meet the day and live life fully. Yeah. And so, great ringtone. And so, what are your tips or like secrets to bringing the energy that you bring? I imagine you cultivate it. Maybe you just naturally have it. But what are any tips around that?
I think that's also another, it's important to know your strengths. Like I would really recommend, I tell all my students to take Strengths Finder by Gallup. You can take a free one, but I think it's like $15-20. You should really, really, know yourself. Really it's not so much not worry about your weaknesses, but use people, product, or process to like compensate for that and really double, triple down on your strengths. So, I love getting and giving energy. So, that's something. If you ask somebody about me, hey, what's Rich like? He's a super connector, and he is an energetic guy who, gives and gets energy. And yeah, I think there is, people have their 5 big personality traits, and there are natural proclivities. I see that with my kids, like they're all different. But that being said, like you have to take care of yourself, and it goes back to stoicism, right? Therefore, if there's only 2 things you can control, which is your reaction and your action, or your effort and your attitude, however you want to frame it, then what are you doing in a very, very intentional, advanced way to optimize for that? And that will give you just more energy in general to be more intentional about your action and reaction. So for me, it's sleep, diet, exercise, meditation, spending good time with people, journaling. Like there's all these daily, steady, important habits that I invest in every day. And then that just, gives me 2.5, 3 times back.
Okay, because you led into another question I had. It had to do with the Aristotle quote. I have it on my phone. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence is not an act, but a habit. And it's so simple, but so powerful. And that's really, it seems, what builds, character and eventually a legacy, And so your habits, you're saying, are like, get good sleep, probably the most underrated habit of all time. Like eat well, you're exercising, you're meditating. Or would you say those are your core habits?
I got really fucking serious at 39 because I just like kind of hit bottom. I was divorced. I was not, I was overweight. I wasn't working out. I was like in and out of shape and, in and out of weight and sleep deprived. And, my relationship with my ex wasn't so great. And I was just like, I was like sick and tired of being sick and tired. So, I was like really getting serious. And I spent a lot of time, and I still do. I invest time and energy into me. Put that air mask on first before you others. And like, what does that mean? It's like, what do you know about sleep? You spend, you should spend a quarter, a third of your life doing it. Like, what do you really know? Matthew Walker, you got to read that book. Why We Sleep, right? What do you really? What do you really know about diet? Like, what do you really, really know? Except what your parents or your, the food pyramid taught you. What do you really know about exercise? Except for maybe your gym teacher taught me in the 80s or whatever, right? And what do I really, meditation, you don't have to believe in it for it to work, but, that's incredibly powerful. Mood regulation, focus, clarity. Journaling, being able to like get the rumination onto paper, right? And really, really intentionally removing all negative people from your life, minimizing it if they're family and you can only minimize it. and then really optimizing for people that give you energy and that you can give energy to, and you can have this positive virtuous cycle relationship. So all like that's already like enough. That's like, and then just make it so that it's not, it's just part of the fabric of your life. And, you know, I didn't have any good habits around any of those. I could do all of them. I was good at them sometimes, but it's like, now I'm really serious about it. And that's going to become part of the fabric of my existence. And I was also a paint outside the lines kind of guy. I always have been. But, you know, one thing I've learned as an entrepreneur is that structure sets you free. And wow. I love, you know, this book by Jocko Willink. I don't know if you ever listen to his podcast, you know, special forces guy, called Discipline Equals Freedom.
Make your bed in the morning, right? That's the first victory.
Sure. And it's like small things,
but
they all add up. And just baking those habits, like removing one bad habit and adding in a new habit, and then that gives you the freedom to really burn brightly in doing stuff outside the lines when it comes to, you know, creating content or new relationships. So, hey, I have to run in just a couple of minutes, but if you have a final question, I'm happy to field it.
Okay, great. I got a few more, but this has been so great, Rich. All right. I'm going to pick one. Does the book talk about AI? Maybe I could combine some things, but okay. So, okay, you've got to, I just talk a little bit about your new book and some of the challenges and opportunities of AI. You know, I work at Google, so we're big into data and AI, right? I'm hearing about it all the time, how we can apply it to businesses. And so, yeah, what are some of the opportunities and challenges of AI, and to finish up with the kind of the book and tie it into that, and like how can people eventually get their hands on it?
So the reason why I'm writing this book at the speed of China is that, you know, I'm broadly writing a series of books, a book a year for the rest of my life is my goal. And this series is going to be around entrepreneurial agility, and speed is a big component of that. And China speed is the fastest in the world, the fastest we've ever seen. You know, this 40-year rise since opening, some of the stats I threw up before, but more importantly, the cycles of innovation. And Elon Musk is quoted as saying, at the end of the day, all that matters is the pace of innovation. That's all that matters. And it's not just innovation, but it's the pace of innovation. And China is outpacing the rest of the world. Like there's no question. Prototyping and execution and launch, and you know, the way they interact with customers, the way they scale, and AI is a gigantic part of that. So one book that I really love, it's a guy I've gotten to know a bit. Matter of fact, you introduced me to Chris Wing.
Yeah.
I introduced Chris to this guy's firm, and Chris worked there for a while.
Oh, yeah.
His name is Dr. Kai-Fu Lee.
Yes,
and
I've heard of him.
He's probably, you know, the thought leader, 60 million followers on the Chinese Twitter. You know, he started, he was the first person that did voice recognition at Apple, and he started the Microsoft research lab in China. He started Google in China, and he started this AI fund. They have 6 unicorns they've invested in, but he's really a thought leader. And he wrote a book called AI Superpowers about China and the US. And indeed, you know, the biggest story of our life right now is how the US and China will share the sandbox. And I'm part of a group called the State Legislators Leadership Foundation, SLLF, and it, you know, endeavors to bring China and US together on a subnational level, state legislators and provincial leaders. And that's my, you know, sort of small part to maybe contribute on that, you know, geopolitical stage. But on the you know, technical and, you know, commercial stage, AI is, I don't think it can be understated that, you know, you look at the entire arc of human history, you know, 50 years internet, 500 years, you know, scientific revolution, 5,000 years civilization, 70,000, you know, 13,000 years agriculture, 70,000 years Homo sapiens, you know, hundreds of thousands, millions of years in this sort of primate form. And somewhere along the line, fire came in there, right? And fire, and like everything else since fire, like forget about it. It's basically fire, artificial intelligence. Like those are the two like quantum leaps, right? The wheel, steam, electricity, whatever else, right? AI, and that's happening in our lifetime. And I mean, like mine and yours, like it's happening right now.
Yeah.
And the estimate, Dr. Ben Goertzel, another guy that I've gotten to know, who's amazing thought leader in AI. I really recommend looking at some of his stuff. His estimate is 2045 is when the singularity will happen. And some people think 2035. Some people
What is the singularity again? That sounds like an epic term. I forget what it is.
The singularity is kind of like, from Terminator, when this entire apparatus comes online, so to speak. It doesn't necessarily have to have, the ability to have consciousness, but it will, just be so much more collectively powerful than our intelligence that then, things start to happen that we can't even conceive of, because it's just exponential, where the artificial general intelligence, or just some specific artificial intelligence, will start to be able to, process and move on its own in a way. Even at your company, Google, as I understand it, a lot of coding is, most of the coding is done through machine learning and artificial intelligence. So there's that's a thing to really keep an eye on, is like what's happening between China and the U.S. And Dr. Lee talks about how in the lab the U.S. is leading, creating algorithms, but in the wild, deploying AI. He
interesting.
China as the Saudi Arabia of data. Like, instead of sitting on a giant oil reserve, it's sitting on all of this data. 900 million mobile phone users. For better or worse, there's just a lot of digital crumbs out there, and they're able to take all that data and process it. So it's kind of like Jurassic Park, right? They come up with the DNA out of the fly, out of the mosquito, from the amber. They cross it with a frog, and they make these dinosaurs. And that's an incredible achievement. But once it starts evolving on the island, then we can't even necessarily foresee or control what's happening. And that's what's happening in China right now, is that the evolution of artificial intelligence is just mind-bogglingly, all-encompassing and fast. And using that for business model innovation, here's an example. JD.com, one of the top 3 internet companies in the world. Probably never heard of it. It's
actually haven't.
It's a
crazy.
Top line, gross merchandise value. It's huge. It's basically, a competitor to Alibaba. And they launched a new iPhone. And how long do you think it took for that iPhone, the first, customer, to get that iPhone in their hand after they ordered it? How fast do you think they could deliver it?
Well, I'm assuming under a day. A day?
Yeah,
under a day.
Faster than that. Like
an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. What?
Faster than that. 7 minutes. 7 minutes.
Wait, how?
This is 7 in Chinese. This is because you can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you can do 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Wow.
So you can be at the market and hold something and then have this in your hand. So this is not a sock puppet. Yes, it is. Shut up. You shut up. I do that joke a lot.
That's a good one.
Because they used AI to basically predict where there was a very high propensity when they launched the iPhone at noon. These apartment buildings, office buildings are going to most likely immediately order it. They pre-filled a lot of the delivery. They have these 3-wheeled electric tricycles. And then they said, okay, hey, at noon, look at your device, and you're going to see some people in this building that are going to order. And then JD stands for Jing Dong. So it went from Jing Dong to Ding Dong, 7 minutes in your hand, right? So it's like that kind of
ding dong.
And that's not just some sort of like outlier gimmick. Like an incredibly large percentage of orders in China are delivered in less than an hour or even in 15 minutes because of the urban density, but also just because of this whole virtuous cycle of like, we're going to use AI, we're going to use and the customer expectations are high, and that informs the rest of the world. So that's all happening. So hey, I have to motor. We're going away to a lovely beachside villa for the weekend.
Rich, let me just say, man, this was too much fun, man. And thank you so much for your mentorship and friendship and for what you shared today. So we'll talk soon.
Excellent. All the best. See you, Chris.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye. And guys, subscribe to Pursuit of Possibility if you want to see more interviews with great people. And again, here's some positive perspective and practical strategies to live life fully. Cheers. I love you all.